Good evening. If you'll join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I want to welcome you to the capital planning meeting, and this is something that we try to do during the course of our budget discussions and planning each year. Some of this material, I believe, has been in front of the Budget Committee. And quite simply, I want to welcome everybody, either watching or here in person. We'll be talking about the capital plan spreadsheet and discussion of two particular key projects, which is the Reed Field Fire Station expansion and the Reed Field Library capital improvements. And then we'll get into public feedback and comments. So we'll hold on public feedback and comments until the end. However, if somebody in the public, if we're using an acronym or there's something like that that needs a clarification, please just approach the microphone and say, I don't understand what that meant, or whatever, so we can clarify that. And then we'll adjourn. I want to just have the members of the Select Board introduce themselves, and then Andy will have Budget Committee members introduce themselves, and I'll ask the town officials who are present here to introduce themselves. So I'm Bruce Burgoyne with the Select Board.
Chris Salmons.
Catherine Mills Woodson.
Dennis Price.
And I'm Andy Tolman.
And Marty Haddish.
Pete Davis.
Ellen Schneider, Rebecca Lambert.
And Teresa Shaw. Hold the mic down.
Eric Dyer, town manager. I'll round it out.
Eric Dyer, town manager, yes. Basically, Eric is going to proceed with sort of the presentation as we go through the slides, and I would encourage discussion and questions in regards to the capital investment plan as we take a look for fiscal year 20. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Eric, please.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and members of the public who've attended here. Yeah, well, we know we'll do what we can for everybody and anybody that shows. And I'll start off with a couple of goals that I think are what we hope to achieve with this meeting. The first is to present the planned capital investment plan. And this, the basis of this document is an inventory of all of our capital assets, or nearly all of them, depending on how you define them. And from that, we have value schedules, replacements costs, lifespans, expectancies, and a lot of information that helps us understand where they are in their life and what the cost of replacement will be. What I've done with this presentation tonight is to try to condense what is a two-page, 8.5 by 14, 9-point font document into something that's a bit more tangible and manageable, that doesn't have stuff that's floating out in 2039, but that focuses on the current fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2020, which sounds very futuristic, I think. Nice number. But in any event, I tried to condense it and put it in a different format than the spreadsheets that I sometimes rely on. So I'll be presenting generally and briefly what these projects are, and then answer any questions that I can about the budget. And one of the things I've been thinking about more as I'm putting this stuff together is not just the dollars and cents, but what the impacts are on operations. Because that, I think, is just as important of a consideration. If we're spending money, we should be seeing an improvement in services, or at least the status quo. And I think that this year particularly, we're seeing some opportunity to improve our operations. So I'm really happy to be able to talk about those things. And then hear any recommended changes to the, the capital investment plan, and discuss policy directives and objectives. And I do hope that we can have a discussion. I don't want to be the only one just talking on things. And so please, if you see me starting to roll and you have to jump in, please do knock me. Tell Dennis he'd be happy to, and we can go on from there. So.
And I might point out, Eric, some of the members of of these two committees serve on other committees, so they may be able to add particular perspective on cemeteries or transfer station or whatever, so.
Absolutely,
Hopefully
yeah.
that will happen as well.
All right. So I'll move right into cemeteries, and these are in no particular order other than these departments, I should say, other than the order they are on the spreadsheet. And so I will just go through them, and the format you see on the slide here is going to be repeated several times. We start with the FY 1920 projects that are anticipated. Then we will talk about the 5-year horizon, what's coming up in the next 5 years as a group, and then any unknowns that are outstanding that could happen really anytime in the future, but probably not likely to happen in the next 5 years unless we have a change in policy direction or something arises as an emergency. So with the cemeteries, we have a strong maintenance need in these areas, in the several cemeteries in town. However, we don't physically own any of the stones. We do have responsibilities for things like retaining walls, some of the crypts. So what we have for capital needs is fairly limited in the cemeteries, but we still do have needs. And for fiscal year 20, we are putting money away for a reserve, $5,000, as we did last year, for any future capital costs. And Andy, could you give me a quick reminder about what some of those things are? I think I touched on a few, but...
Well, the biggest potential is that there's retaining walls across the front of 2 of our cemeteries that are not in really good repair and have some foundation issues. They are holding up at the moment, and we're working with the road committee in an endeavor to improve the drainage on one of them. We hope we'll settle it down. But if we aren't able to fix that, at some point, they're likely to start falling over. And we want to be ready to put them back up if need be, although we really hope they don't ever fall over.
All right, yeah, so that actually that relates to the 130,000 under the unknown category. And I believe 100 was for Reed Field Corner and 30 was for Chase?
Case, that's correct.
Case, not Chase, yeah. Yeah, okay. So in the 5-year horizon, we don't have any needs expected, but one of these 2 unknowns could be coming up. And then the other one on here is the East Reed Field Cemetery, 7,500 for road construction. And this is for a gravel road, correct? Something that maybe has two gravel paths, wheel paths, not necessarily a full road.
Right, it still would be a kind of a cemetery grade road suitable for very low speed travel. But, and again, we're getting along so far with what we've got, but the potential is there to need it. And the engineers thought we should build a reserve for it.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
While we're on that point, could you clarify how much is in that reserve now?
Yes. I believe we just started saving, so, and I'll point out, because we'll be referencing these spreadsheets a number of times, we have 2 spreadsheets, one with a gray column somewhere towards two-thirds of the way across, and one very near the end of the page. The first one, titled Capital Planning Summary, is our 5-year summary plan. The other, which is untitled, is a summary of our reserve balances. And so if we look through here, we are looking at about 6 or 7 rows down, 1-450.
840,
Cemeteries. And so we've got, what was the number, Dennis?
I think it's 451.
8466.
Isn't it cemetery capital that we want?
Oh,
Yeah, 8466.
okay, that's right, yeah, cemeteries,
51.
that's right, yeah. So that one, we have 12,000 we're adding to that, so we'll have around 18,000 at the end of the current fiscal year. When we add in what we expect to have coming in from FY 20, that'll bring that up to over 22,000.
So Eric?
Yes.
First bullet, the annual reserve, it's an annual contribution to reserves.
Absolutely,
Right,
yes.
So it's not maintaining reserves at 5 grand, it's an annual addition to reserves.
Absolutely right, yes. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I will, while we're on this reserve sheet, I want to thank Teresa for a lot of work that she did getting this together and keeping track of it throughout the year. She is always, making sure that things that get expended are properly accounted for and included in this spreadsheet, helping the auditors, helping me understand where things are. So thank you, Teresa, for all your work on that. I took some of Teresa's work and added a couple columns. Most of the stuff to the left of that gray line is additions and subtractions from an audited balance that we do have, or I guess it's unaudited at this point because we haven't had the final draft. But what we're trying to do with all of that work and all of those numbers is find out where we think we're going to be at the end of the current fiscal year, the one we're in now, so that we can look ahead to what we might pull out or utilize for the future, including the next fiscal year. The column to the furthest to the right is actually what I consider a worst-case scenario. This shows what we anticipate to have for reductions without anything going in. So we haven't shown the reserve accounts, the amounts that we budgeted. We're just showing that if we spend what we expect to spend in FY20, what those balances will look like. And we could go ahead and recreate something similar to what's on the other side of this page for FY20, but at this point we haven't, and we're just using this as a planning tool. And again, that gray line is really the key, so we can understand at the end of this fiscal year that we're currently in, what our financial resources are. So any questions on that spreadsheet generally, because we will be going back to it a few times?
I have some more questions about the cemetery
Sure.
summary information. So if I understand this, the only impact in 1920 is to add another 5,000 to the reserve, but we're not budgeting anything for granite wall repairs or road construction in 2019-20.
No, not at this point.
So, picking up on what Andrews said, it may be, dealing with the wall may be a more imminent issue than we would like it to be. And, just putting in another 5,000 into that reserve, what would we do if we experienced a significant deterioration of that situation, between now and 2021?
Well, I guess the short answer is that it's not expected to be in that time range. I think that we did have some questions, concerns about some settlement. I think a lot of it came from the crypt and movement on the face of the crypt, but that is being addressed out of this year's budget. And maybe, Andy, you can answer better than I about the horizon on this.
Yeah, there's two pieces of work that are happening this year. One is we are doing some repairs to the crypt, which is part of that front-facing wall.
Oh, okay.
And it's the tallest and least stable part. And we're also working with the road folks to reset a culvert to improve the drainage along the front of that wall. Right now in the spring, there's some fairly significant ponding that softens up the underpinnings more than the engineer was happy with. But we're hoping if we can regrade and reset that culvert, we'll dry it out enough so that it will settle down, and that coupled with the crypt repair, we hope will hold us for quite a while.
And so the point would be that these are operational expenses of a higher magnitude of maintenance that'll be done
Right.
during this coming year that hopefully will push the wall repair needs further out
Yeah, exactly.
or mitigate at
Yeah.
the time being.
So my understanding then would be that if the wall started to move, we would have a year or two to plan for what might be happening? You're not expecting it to just tumble over when the snow melts?
We hope not, and that's, the engineer actually said that it would probably show signs of failure rather than failing catastrophically, so. A couple of years ago, but.
So to Martin's point, we would have time to plan to boost up our capital reserve or to come up with funding,
Yeah.
most likely.
Or to address it over a multi-year period.
Right. Thank you.
All right, any other questions on the cemetery department? All right. Moving on to library, and this is one of the projects that we'll be talking about in more detail later after we kind of move through this. So I'm hoping we can just summarize, get the point across, and then move on, and then have those follow-up discussions for the library and fire station after. We do have a large repair plan for the building in FY20, and the need for this came about as a result of a building inspection we had done. I think predicated on several years of review by various town committees and just a general debate about the future of the library, whether we were going to have it remain in its current location or find a new building. But most recently, we did have a building inspection done that revealed a major issue with one of the timbers in the roof. One of the four has a pretty severe crack. It's been repaired in the past, but it's not getting any better, and the other three are at risk of other potential issues. And the whole roof itself is basically a shell. Imagine a tortoise shell that's empty. That's more or less what we have, just a hip roof with nothing really supporting it on the inside. And that is problematic from an engineering perspective, as we now know. Back in 1820, when it was built, it probably wasn't that big of a deal. But then again, it's lasted this long, so they did something right. But the roof is the major project needing to be addressed structurally. Also, the shingles are failing, and unfortunately failing prematurely. They were done, I think, 12 years ago. Is that right, Teresa? 12 years ago for the roof shingles, yeah. So they're at the end of life. They should have at least probably another 8 to 12 years in them. But they need a full replacement. So the question is now, with structural issues and shingle issues, how do we approach that? What do we do? And we're looking at several options, from either just a partial repair with reinforcement to full repair of the roof. I have began working with an engineering firm, Mainland Development, to look at this project and the fire station project. And I'll say now we're actually looking at them somewhat together, not just because of their proximity, not just because they both have needs at the current time, but because they also share a major infrastructure element in the septic system that they both share. Out behind the fire station. So there are reasons for looking at them together. Other projects that will be looked at with this large repair would be emergency egress, HVAC, and then general interior repair work. Because as a number of folks have pointed out, this is our home for the library. We have essentially settled on that. And if we're going to be doing work, we should be doing it thoroughly and completely. And I think I can agree with that approach. So this is a placeholder number until we have more firm engineering estimates, and we may need to look at scaling one way or the other depending on where these things come in. But that's underway. And right now, I am proposing that these funds come from the undesignated fund. And that certainly is something that we can discuss, and I hope we do. Because I originally looked at this and the fire station as a single project with bond financing, but have kind of, I won't say backtracked on it, but had second thoughts about combining two projects that are, just because they're related and it makes financial sense to put them together, that maybe it might not in other ways. So I hope we can discuss that more later. Nothing in the 5-year horizon outside of that major repair. I do want to point out that we are doing some major, I say major, $25,000 in work through a grant through Stephen and Tabitha King that's being led by the library board and Deb Keel particularly, which is fantastic. So we're looking at this, again, operationally as well as the physical infrastructure. So and the last point I want to make is the library parking lot paving. The gravel actually is holding up very well. So this one, I think, unless we have a real need, we might not ever get to it. But tastes change, as do the conditions of gravel driveways. So we'll see what happens on that.
Okay, but this is not, that $5,000 is not on the capital plan.
It should be, but
Well, it's not under the capital plan, under library. It says paved, but there's no money.
oh, let's actually, it has no money. I do have a $10,000 number in there. So it looks like I might have updated that, and I didn't put a date in. So that's my mistake on that. So yes, there should be a number in there, and that 10,000 is probably more accurate than the 5 I put in my spreadsheet. So I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
And I know we can talk about this more later, Eric, but I think one of the discussions you and I were having is if we do end up going with heat pumps in the library at this time, that will probably push out that boiler from 2026 to some later date, because the boiler would be underutilized.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an approach that I like to see. I think we're taking it in a few different areas where making intelligent improvements can help defer other costs. So definitely one of those happening here, potentially.
And I assume that the 30,000 for the roof in 2026 would go away if we repair the roof now?
That would also go probably to a 20 to 25 year horizon, depending. I'm hoping to consider at least a metal roof, which would push it out to something that we won't even have to consider in 2 lifetimes. So, but those are decisions for down the road.
Okay, but they may change as we develop the library project.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So moving on to the next department of administration. In the current budget year, we're looking at a revaluation reserve of $10,000 annually, which will result at the end of the fiscal year that we're budgeting for, FY20, a balance of $105,000. I will note that over the last, at least starting last year, we increased from $5,000 annually to $10,000. So the town actually did a lot of savings over the past 12, 15 years. And we're finding now that we expect that revaluation to come in the next 5 years.
So is that really a capital item? I know I'm like a pain in the butt about this. This is not, it's a savings account for an
Yeah.
activity. It's not capital.
It's not a hard asset,
No.
It's not even a
soft
soft
asset.
asset. It's an operating cost.
Mhm.
And it's a reserve fund, but it should be in your operating budget, not in
Okay.
your capital budget.
Well, I don't have any issue moving it. I mean, as long as we're continuing to save,
You should ask
yeah.
your auditor about it, but.
What is the projected cost of revaluation?
Somewhere between 100 and 150,000.
So we're on the right glide path.
Yeah, and I think that with our current assessor, we can probably realize some savings. So it might be closer to the low end than the high end, but that can change as well, so, yeah. But I will make a note to ask our auditor and review, and I think you're right, that it is, it's not necessarily a,
It's a savings account.
yeah, it's a savings account, yeah. And so I guess another point too about this spreadsheet is that this is a combination of reserve accounts and capital accounts, so.
Well, you just have to say it that way.
Ellen's happier now.
I am.
That's good.
That's why we had.
We have this conversation over and over.
We do, it just changes the individual topic, right? But yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, there are certain considerations when something's in your capital budget that can have certain, maybe I'm just too sensitive on the political stuff, but coming from where I came from, you would keep that capital budget down. So, and there's no like lifespan you can put on this. Like a
Well, I mean,
capital item.
about 20 years. I mean, honestly.
It doesn't
I-
have a
you know,
useful
It's a bit
life.
rhetorical, but yeah. Yeah, but no, I mean, really, it's been, when was the last revaluation? Probably 20 years ago, something like that. But,
Probably.
yeah.
But it doesn't have a useful life.
No. All right, so that was the
Don't we all vote?
2005. Okay, so quite a while, yeah. Trying to think of the word I want here for, I want to look at that, operating budget, that's what we want, yeah. All right. So administration, Guile Hall being the town office, basically is in the administration department. And over the next 5 years, we expect to have a little over $100,000 in investment. And a number of these items could go further or may come sooner. I think that the parking lot is probably very, very close. The boiler and HVAC seems to be chugging along. Our issues that we have tend to be with the valves in the in the circulator system more than anything else. The septic is an unknown. That is something that we need to look at getting an inspection done because we are due for pumping and inspection on that, and that'll give us a better idea of where that might fall. And then the windows, they work, but they're drafty. So that's one of those quality questions of how drafty do we want them to be before we either replace them or find some way of weather stripping or some life extension. But they're as old as the renovation of the building, so I think they're on, what, 25 years now, Teresa? Probably, 90-something? Yeah.
Pushing 30.
I think I've got it right here in the spreadsheet.
It says
actually.
1990,
1990, there we go.
so that's
Yeah.
29 years now.
Wasn't there something with the elevator too? Or was that this year?
Oh, that was an operational issue. There's one for you.
Okay.
That-
It's a repair, wasn't a repair.
It was a repair, not a replacement.
Okay.
We switched from automated to manual.
Yep, okay.
But yeah, so then unknown, and this is a big one, and I didn't know where else to put it, but renewable energy investment and solar. I have been talking with our two prospective entities that may be interested in providing a solar operation for us, and I'm hoping to have them attend a meeting on March 18th, which would be the second select board of the month. I haven't heard back from them yet, but the board did ask for a meeting in March, and that seems to be the most likely at this point. But we'll be continuing to work on that, and I think the cost of this likely won't be an immediate cost. If we do something, it could be 7 years, 5 to 7 years before we have to make any kind of investment if we do. One plan we saw had an option where we just continued to pay our fixed utility rate, and that was that. But a lot of discussion to be had here, and something, but it wasn't something I wanted to just skip over, even though we don't have a lot of tangible numbers for it. Anybody else want to talk on anything in?
No, the only thing I have mentioned at select board meetings that this is a possibility for a non-financial warrant question. So there may be something that is worded that allows the select board in the town to continue to investigate and to perhaps enter into a contract on some sort of financial neutral basis. That would be, obviously, would do a review and so forth. But we haven't even talked about wording that or anything at this point.
No. Teresa did just put together a draft of our warrant, which doesn't include any of those non-financial questions at this point, or at least not many. So, yeah. So we're heading down that road.
So I do have a question on the Guile Hall parking lot. If I recall, we have talked in the past about changing some of the access for for handicap parking. And so, where do we stand with that?
Right now, we're just in a holding pattern. I think that we're going to be coming up fairly quickly, and it might be, and probably ought to be moved into that, the next 2 years of repairing the parking lot and addressing the accessibility issues. One of the factors here is that if you do repave a parking area in a building that serves the public, you're obligated to come up to the current standards for ADA. So these two things, I think, go together, that repair work, the accessibility, the push-button door, all those things. So it's just taken a backseat to other projects at this point.
But wasn't it in this year's budget?
I was going to say,
I
I
thought
recall,
we raised money to do it in this year's project, so it would still be sitting there, so you don't need to raise money to do it again.
I'll have to look. I don't recall that
well, I
being in the
recall
budget.
talking
I think we
about
talked
I
about it.
remember quite a bit of discussion
Yeah.
Okay.
about it.
Well, I'll look.
And matter of fact, I remember the statement being said, it'll be done this year, probably by me.
Well,
It may
and-
not
me
have
or by
been,
me?
it
By
may
me,
not have
well,
included.
not me doing
but
the
it-
work, but
There would have
that-
been like a ramp or whatever, so that somebody
Yeah.
could easily
Okay.
get in the door, and I'm virtually positive it was in this fiscal year's budget.
Because I think the discussion was that it was, we had hoped it was in the year before's budget, and we couldn't do it, so we pushed it out to this current year.
But you wouldn't need to raise money.
That's right, because we had the authorization already. Yeah. Okay, that makes
Well-
more sense to me.
You should have raised the money already.
Teresa,
In
do you
the
have
tax
warrant
bill.
from last year?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but we have 24,000 in the carry forward, so that would include it. But there was nothing added this last fiscal year.
So it may have been the year before that we discussed it, and then it was deferred or
I
delayed.
was
So.
here the year before, so.
well, I would suggest we just get an answer back on that, take a
Yeah, no, no,
a look and
absolutely.
see what we can find.
You had somebody do an engineering project on it, right, Eric?
We did have a survey done of the lot. That was the initial step, but it hasn't moved forward since from that. So if we need to, we can reprioritize. We'll have to look at other projects, but that's probably discussion for another
Yep.
time.
Okay.
But I will look into that. And
Let's
see.
put that on a select board agenda. Put that in Chris's notes for that.
No.
All right. So moving into recreation parks and activities, we have nothing scheduled for this budget year. In the 5-year horizon, we have a couple of amenity improvements. The first of which is repair to existing structures. The picnic tables and picnic shelters down there do need to have their roofs replaced. The shingles are failing, and we'll have to replace those, so $5,000 for those. New larger group picnic activity shelter. This is something that I've put forward and discussed with the budget, with the rec board. The idea of having a shelter that can hold, say, 20, 25 people, perhaps even more, that would be able to be used for outdoor education, large group events, and just general larger space for those type of things. 10,000 for that, and then the beach storage building replacement. The bluish gray. I think it's so faded now. I don't know what color it used to be, but that is getting to be. It's settling into the ground. It's on its last legs, so we will need to replace that. So that's 10,000 estimated to repair, or to really fully replace that structure. And that number might go up if we start talking to builders. And then unknowns, rec sports storage. This is one that we've been talking about a lot. Their needs are not currently being met by the storage spaces they have. They have some space down at the ball field, but it's not accessible year-round. And they have a lot of equipment stored in the basement here of the town office, and even more, I think, stored at the homes of individual board members. So it's been an ongoing issue, ongoing need, and we're looking at storage containers, the shipping containers that have become more prevalent and also more popular for storage. And that's something we might pursue this year because they do have reserve funds available. And the need just continues to grow as they add and replace equipment. So anything on rec? Any questions?
Not a question, but a comment. I think we discussed this at the Solid Waste Committee meeting, and I think, Eric, you had mentioned possibly putting that unit down at the transfer station, so it would be rather accessible for all the people using the rec equipment, because they're such a varied group of volunteers. I mean, that would be a central location.
Yeah, absolutely. It's some open land, and it is accessible. So yeah, that's the intent. If that
And it's not standing out in the middle of the beach,
no, it wouldn't.
maybe more importantly.
Or the ball field for that matter. Yeah, all right. So moving on to roads and infrastructure. This one takes a little bit of time to go through, but I think it'll be worth it. We have, in the last couple of years, put together a complete inventory, replacement schedule and cost schedule for replacement, or excuse me, for repaving of our full road network. All the paved roads, we're looking at a roughly 12-year lifespan, and we're using an estimated asphalt price to installed asphalt price to generate numbers that we then feed into the budget process for repair. One of the interesting things is that when we did look at this, we found that the annualized cost, essentially in perpetuity, in current dollars for that paving schedule, keeping that 12-year cycle, is around $149,000 a year. And that will, of course, fluctuate based on asphalt prices and the cost of labor and all that, but current dollars. And so the next road that's up for a 1-inch overlay is South Road, and it may seem to be in pretty good condition, but we're very fortunate in Reedfield to have our roads in such good condition that we can continue to maintain them while they're at their, not the top, but slightly over the top of their life curve, before the costs get higher and before the damage gets more severe. We do have some small delamination, some small cracking on South Road, and it is, I think, about time for that overlay. So we expect that to cost less than the $150,000 budgeted. However, the money that isn't spent, I think it was around 123 or 125 for South Road, the money that's not spent would stay in that reserve and help offset a year or two down the road when we have a project that might cost $200,000. So later on, I'll talk a little bit about the debt service and how that affects all of this. But right now, that's what we're looking at, is $150,000 for South Road. We're also looking at $25,000 for pedestrian and safety improvements at Reedfield Corner. And this is essentially to mimic more or less what's in front of the store. Right now, we have parking in that area. We have obstruction of vision. The sight lines are very rarely what they should be, and in the wintertime, it's quite a hazard for everybody. And this one came up as a result of the Age-Friendly Committee bringing this to our attention and saying, you know, it's just not working. We did have a meeting with the owners of the Masons Hall, as well as representatives from the post office, representatives from DOT, and some folks from the Age-Friendly Committee and Road Committee. So we had a good meeting on it, and a lot of interest in moving this forward, again, for pedestrian and vehicular safety. DOT owns the right-of-way, and this is a situation where they said, well, you know, we're not going to do anything. We see the problem, but we're not going to do anything. So if you want to, we'll let you do it in our right-of-way. So thank you very much, DOT. But it's a need, and I think it needs addressing, so we're pursuing that. The other item here is $50,000 for repair to deteriorating concrete walls and roof components at the salt sand shed. We budgeted $35,000 this year that will be carried forward for use. So we'll be requesting $15,000 additional in order to complete that project. And, you know, again, this is one that should have been further along this year than it is, and I apologize that it isn't. But I have talked with the contractor, and we are planning on leaving that building near empty at the end of the season, so that we can get in, do the engineering review, and then get an assessment of the work, and hopefully perform it early in 2020. So I'm thinking, you know, July, August, September, in advance of putting more material back into the building. 5-year horizon, we have Torsi Pond.
And there's a
Oh.
different protection process for addressing deterioration, right? On the rebuild.
Oh, yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a different kind of facing or something, or product that's used so we don't get into that salt deterioration. as we
Yeah,
have.
absolutely. The concrete will be a much better mixture than it was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and we will be putting a sealant on it after. One thing that we don't know is whether there was ever a sealant put on it 25 years ago. One thing we do know is that it wasn't part of the regular maintenance schedule to reapply that. So that's going to be something we'll be looking at as well, ongoing, would be every 4 or 5 years, putting on another application of that material. So, absolutely. We'll also be cutting out any of the rebar that's too far deteriorated and replacing it with an epoxy-coated rebar. So, looking at it from a few different directions.
Eric, if we have questions on this year's fiscal year, do you want me to wait until after you finish the slide and then go back and talk about all of them?
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I have concerns on the Reedfield Corner improvements.
Okay.
And I'm questioning if that should be a separate warrant article, because we're asking the town to spend money that isn't for town property. It's for the right-of-way of DOT. And it's not for a town-owned building. I mean, nothing at, and I know we put the sidewalk in, and that's not in front of a town-owned building either, but that was its separate item when we did that. And so I just have concerns about how we approach that and justify spending taxpayer dollars on DOT's responsibility. And it's okay if they want to say, you know, go ahead and do it, but I don't know how other people feel about that, so.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they don't take responsibility for it. And so we're doing it for traffic and safety reasons for our population here in Wheatfield. We feel strongly about that. But you're right, it's probably should be an isolated warrant article.
Well, and I'd like to see a little more a lot more cooperation amongst the parties involved, not just DOT saying, go ahead. If we're gonna do this, and I know that the parties involved don't really wanna do anything. And so I'm just wondering how successful we're going to be if the owners of the two buildings don't wanna change anything that they're doing with their business, their property, which is their right to do those things. But how much impact will our investment have if nothing else changes? So I just want us to go in eyes wide open. I have no objection to doing the project. I just want everybody to understand who owns what. And if we do something and nothing really changes there, then that's all we have. It's no change.
Well, it eliminates parking in front of the post office, is that correct?
Yeah, it would, and it wouldn't allow for the nose-in parking or even the parallel parking that happens in that area, yeah.
In the wrong way parallel parking, I might add.
Yeah.
Adjacent to the road.
Yeah,
So then, if
that
you
puts people
eliminate,
into the lot.
so if you eliminate the parking alongside Route 17, that means all access to both buildings from vehicles would be on the sides of the buildings or behind them? So
That's-
people would be walking up to the ramps or to the front door?
That's correct, and I guess you would assume that the additional build-out there would have a calming effect as well, I would think.
Certainly
Okay.
would hope, yeah.
I did not understand that was the scope of the project, was to pull that out so that there was not parking on, because I know it's a pretty rough parking lot to, the people who came before the select board that had been speaking with the age-friendly committee were talking about the inaccessibility of using the post office. And if you're trying to use the post office from the side of that lot that is full of potholes and divots and uneven ground and stepping up onto a ramp and walking up a ramp that's not always shoveled, which is okay, but I'm not sure we're helping out the safety and accessibility for our residents by making that the main entrance.
Yeah.
So I just want us to really look this over.
My main concern is the logging truck at 38 miles an hour. You probably, yeah, I was being very generous there.
That's right.
And then, of course, you get into the whole winter clearance thing. I mean, what it looks like now.
So can I just, I'm sorry, we could spend all night talking about parking lot, but can I ask a few questions in regard to this?
Sure.
And I appreciate you bringing it up if you sort of open this door, because I was curious about it too. Not knowing what could happen, of course, but knowing that there is a need of a problem, would there be then some sort of, I guess I kind of agree, would we be wanting to fix an issue that we have no jurisdiction over? Because who owns that actual parking lot? It would be, is it the government? Because
We don't own the parking lot.
right, we don't
Yeah,
own them.
yeah.
No, the
But
government
the
rents.
But the mail, the
They
mail,
rent
they
from the
rent.
Masons.
And the Masons, do they own that parking lot as well?
They do.
Okay. so
I
the
assume
Masons-
some of it is owned by the store as well.
Yeah, anything, I think the drive, the drive in between is owned by the store, and then basically the side of the building, all the way down, and then the far entrance and exit is Mason owned, by my understanding.
But the little parking, the 3 or 4, the indentation in front of the building is DOT.
That's DOT right away, and their right away actually
Right.
extends about halfway into that funky concrete curb with the railing on it.
Yeah.
So the project would fully be within the scope of the DOT right of way.
Right. So I guess my only thing is the obviously the accessibility. If we can prove that, hey, this is a dangerous way to get to our postal facility, then it would seem it would seem more appropriate. You know what I mean? I guess that's I not knowing what they are. I agree. I'd love to do it, but I agree. Are we trying to fix a problem that?
I mean, I obviously don't believe that we're trying to fix a problem we don't have a stake in.
Okay.
Especially because it was, we did the exact same thing 20 feet away. And we did it for very similar reasons: sight distance, pedestrian and traffic safety, people parking in front of the store. I mean, granted, it's further down the road, but the issues are still there, especially when you consider the entrance and exit out of that central lane. So, we have the opportunity. I think there's a need. It was brought to us in large part by an advisory committee. So I think that there's something there. But I absolutely agree with both of you that we should be pursuing this carefully, that we should be making sure that we can get buy-in. And certainly initially it seemed to be the case from the owners of the buildings. They weren't going to object to the improvements. They were actually in favor of them. But what they do in their back lot, whether they change traffic flow or throw in more gravel, I think we can't at this point dictate that. So we have to do this on our own, what we believe are our own merits or the merits of the safety issue.
It would seem, though, that some coordination would be appropriate if possible. And I'm not a traffic study person or anything, but it would seem that between the two buildings, if that was entrance one-way only, that would eliminate a huge problem there. The first entrance between the store and the Masons building, that if that was one way, that alley, I'll call it an alley, I guess, but they were not interested in doing that, is that correct?
Not initially, no.
Well, I know
But-
in Manchester, when they rebuilt Mulligan's, I don't think they were particularly interested in traffic patterns either, but when they got their building permit, they were very interested in improving the traffic flow, and they have dedicated in lanes and dedicated out lanes because it makes it safer for everybody. So I think there might be room for us to negotiate. We're making this improvement, can you make this? It's a give and take.
Yeah.
It does seem like a common sense. Otherwise, you have the main road, the alley, and the other far, so you have three different ways that you could have a car coming out of it. So I'll just,
Yeah, so now we're kind of getting into what I kicked off, which was talking about traffic without being traffic people.
that's right, yeah.
So I was just raising a concern, and now it's raised, and I'm
No.
happy, and thank you, and if we
Yeah.
continue it at another time, I'd be very happy also.
While we're here.
Sure. Well,
I'm sorry, I have to raise one more question, not
Sure.
about the parking, but if there is a handicap access issue for the post office, isn't it the federal government's responsibility to provide, handicap access to its own facilities?
Or
Or the Masons, the building owner, since they rent, I
Yeah,
guess.
but still,
They had to do those improvements at the Kents Hill Post Office, and they did. And they have a covered walkway, and it meets at grade with the parking lot.
Yeah.
And there's a wide enough door and all of those sorts of things. So that's another avenue that could be pursued to have cooperation to make it better for our residents.
Isn't there a sign for one handicap space at the end of the ramp on the corner of the building, or am I just?
One spot.
One spot, yeah. Well, again, we probably should move on.
All right.
But I appreciate that.
So that one may stay in the budget, we might move to the next 5-year horizon, we'll see. We'll have discussion on it. Thanks for all that.
Yeah.
I didn't mean that we had to postpone it.
Well, no, I'm kind of joking.
Just more strong
But,
coordination.
Torsi Pond Bridge repairs, we have been saving for this for the past 2 years. We are adding an additional 5,000 to this reserve for this capital project. And we expect that in probably 2021, fiscal year 2021 is when that construction will happen. Repairs to the eroding base of that bridge, as well as some cracking in the abutments. There's a chance that could happen sooner, but right now I think it's probably comfortably in that next fiscal year after the 2021 horizon.
And there's a coordination issue there as well with the people who own the dam, the Torsi Lake Association. And we do want to coordinate with them because it could be some financial benefit to both groups, correct?
Absolutely. We have
Using the same contractor or whatever.
memorandum of understanding
Yeah.
detailing our efforts
That's
to work
right.
together. Yeah.
And it's in our packet.
It was in the select board package.
It's in this
Oh,
packet.
okay.
Yeah, that's right,
Mhm.
yeah.
Thank you.
As
Well,
well,
it was online. I hope you printed it.
it is online. I didn't print off copies of the full packet for the meeting tonight, but I did include the slideshow as well as copies of the schedules. So.
No, it's in there.
Good. Unknowns are the Woolen Mill Bridge, also known as the Giles Road Bridge. And this one, I have an and with 3 little dots. We do need to, at some point, pull that bridge out. What we do with it after that is a fairly wide open question. This dollar figure, I think, covers removal and then replacement with some kind of a pedestrian bridge. It does not even come close to touching the cost of having to put in a full replacement that would allow traffic to continue on that road.
Is there a legal requirement of when that bridge needs to be addressed?
No, there's not, and actually I included in the packet a letter from DOT saying, thanks, this is your problem, which, is understandable.
They're pretty good, yeah.
They're really stepping up to the plate here.
I don't want to be out of place, but yesterday when we were at that meeting, I overheard another town official from the town talking, Sean Goodman, about grants and stuff available for bridges. Has anybody ever pursued that for that bridge?
Not that I'm aware of.
There are some, just listen, what I was listening, overheard, it seemed like there was.
To remove them? Or,
Rebuild that.
I thought the residents didn't want that rebuilt.
Is that
Well, I
why-
don't think the
is that-
residents do, but again, holistically, we have to look at, the entire town's utilization of any road. My own personal opinion is it's probably not a huge impact location, so probably removing it and just ending it, it makes more sense, but we'd have to go through that piece.
And this is kind of off what you guys are talking about, but past couple of months, I've heard the ambulance
No, I think
Yeah.
that's a great.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's okay for us, but like the medics and law enforcement, they
Yeah.
go home and it just ask out, there's been a couple of instances.
That's a
in
great-
certain ones,
It's a
yeah.
great suggestion.
Well, I know when this originally became a non-used bridge, I had not been on the select board long, and I've always had a concern about our liability, because it's not really barricaded. It has a couple Jersey barriers, but if someone were to plow through that and we have a bridge that isn't officially closed, and it's not officially open, and there's a
Just
problem.
officially deep.
Where does the
Yeah.
litigation go? And so I've always wanted us to make a decision and close it or open it for that reason. So I don't know if that's justified, if that's a thing, but it seems that litigation takes place more often now than not, so that would be worth pursuing, as well as Lee's renaming. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Now, was it a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, we had a group of engineering students from
UMO?
Orono that came down and had this proposal for how we could rebuild that. And their understanding of how devoted the town is to its history, they were even figuring how to dig up from the stream bed some of the old support blocks and put them out in a more prominent place, so people could say, well, these blocks were here in 1892.
Yeah.
But I think they were looking at it as more of a pedestrian crossing, not a traffic.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so we have been dabbling with this, and that was something we did do last year, or maybe 2 years ago now. But yeah, there's been interest in it, but I guess what we need to do is find out whether it's a priority for us or not.
I just think probably from a capital planning point of view, deciding what we're going to do makes a lot of sense, and get on with it.
Yeah, okay, all right. So maybe we can look at that next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's
Yeah.
immediately
Yeah.
urgent.
But to put it in the plan somewhere,
Mhm.
Yeah.
rather than leave it.
Well, and to get a
As an
decision that,
Well,
yes, we're going to
either
have this
decide you're gonna
bridge,
fix it
or we're not going to
replace
have this
it or
bridge. Right,
remove it.
yeah.
Make a
Right.
decision.
But
yeah.
this is just really closing it and making it a pedestrian bridge.
No, it's and
No,
with
it-
3 dots.
It would be, yeah, the dollar value is a rough, very rough approximation of removing the existing structure and then putting in a replacement pedestrian bridge. Something like what is downstream a quarter mile. But
Right,
that's.
so just removing the actual road structure, the upper structure, and putting in a pedestrian bridge has this price tag.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, removing is not just $10,000, take it out and you're done.
No.
It's
no.
huge.
Yeah. And then protection, again, something probably more than Jersey barriers. Once that bridge is gone, we want to make sure what we have there is definitive and safe and all that. So, all right, well, I'm going to wrap that one up. Thanks again for that discussion. Church Road sidewalk, this one, I can report that we just got a letter from the state of Maine saying that we did not get our funding. Again, they have other projects that are higher priority in more populous areas, and so we're still another year out, and one more chance to review and consider the project and work on our application. So unfortunately, that was not a success, but.
But we have the matching money in.
We do have the matching money in, that $45,000 is in reserve, and this would put a construction time frame, if we receive the project next year, sometime in the 2023, 2024 timeframe. So still quite a ways out.
So now you really won't be happy with me. But just want to know, you've got a $150,000 placeholder in there for the next 5 years, but when we look at the detail sheet that you gave us about halfway through the package, and you look at I guess this is from the road surface management system. This is the page I'm on, it's the teeny tiny print.
Oh, sure.
In the short
yeah,
one.
That's, a lot of that data is from that
Can't see
software, yeah.
Right, but the dollar amounts are not anywhere near the 150,000. And when you get to 2023, it's 500,000. So I'm just wondering why we're not putting in a different placeholder and then maybe talking about bonding if we're talking about being this much over that estimate. So there we go.
Yeah, no, we talked about that with the road committee, and it looks as though in a couple of years that we're gonna have a big payment. We're also gonna have a year or two there where we have less than the 150. I think that at this point, we're comfortable with that annualized amount, in large part because we can bond if we choose to. However, we might only need to borrow a very small amount, say maybe 100,000 instead of the full 500 by savings. So when we look at this over the long term, that level of savings is appropriate, I think, because it's not every year, we're not going to be guaranteed that we're going to have to spend that amount of money. We can pull or push, in many cases, 1 year or 2 years, either direction. So even though we have that schedule that shows some rises and dips, we'll have opportunities to save, and then we'll have years where we spend more than we save. And so I think that in aggregate, it's going to work out, and that there wasn't a lot of concern, at least this year, that we're facing a need to put more money away. Because if we're doing it as we go, it should work out, I guess is the short answer.
Well, I guess then where I'm coming from is I'd like to see that schedule revised so that it comes closer to the 150. If there are projects that you think can be moved, because the numbers are 189, 190, and 502, going 3 years out. So none of those years are lower.
I think what Eric is saying is the revenues will change,
Well, they may.
where we pull the money from.
Well, no, because I think I think he's talking about changing the priority on some of these, right? It's something that's scheduled for, say, 21 might not have to be done, then it could be done in 22 or 3.
Yeah, potentially, absolutely, yeah, or a portion of the length and not the full length. But I think that, I mean, I'd have to go look at the schedule, but there's a fair chance that we may have to borrow or at some point in the future. Maybe have a 3-year bond or something to cover one of those big lumps. But at this point, we're not worried about it, not yet, anyway.
Okay. That's just one of our biggest expenses, and to me, it seems out of balance, so.
Yeah, I guess the impact, the best way to smooth the financial impact is to continue on, I think, with a level of, with something close to that $150,000 to $200,000 a year. And if we have a year where we need more, we can try to find it from other revenue sources. As Bruce suggested, maybe we pull something out of the undesignated, or we bond over a short period of time. And this is just, I'm just throwing stuff out in order to make that, because I guess what I'm saying is even though we have a lot of expenses in 3 or 4 years, that might change. And if we put away $250,000 this year, that in 7 years, we're going to be, only having to put away 50 or something like that. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that was a very good answer, but anyway, I'll work on it.
You're telling me they're movable targets, and that the road committee is on top of this, and so I'm just trusting that you're going to move things as need be, or ask for us to bond and not have a $500,000 road expense out of taxes in a year, 3 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that about right, Pete? You think that?
Yes, the road
Okay.
committee does not want that.
Okay. Well,
We're trying to keep it level, and we've done moving of things over the last few years to try to keep it at that level
right.
pace.
I just want to make sure that we're putting enough capital aside to fund that, because you guys have done a tremendous amount of work to do that. So, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. That about does it for roads and infrastructure. Moving on to transfer station. We have one open top container coming up for FY20. We are going to be purchasing one this year for $6,000 and then 2 more in subsequent years, as this note indicates. So we'll be purchasing 4 overall to replace our current ones that are probably close to 20 years old. On the 5-year horizon, we have a MSW trash compactor, which is the household waste compactor, at 30,000, and that's very likely going to be FY21, because we are starting to have issues with that. Backhoe replacement, a few years after that, at 100,000, and that's probably not for a new piece of equipment. That would be for a used backhoe that we can bump around the transfer station. Access loop road paving, this is more or less just the section that is outside of the parking lot. So if you think about the loop, we have the new paved section, and then that abuts 2 areas of rough asphalt, and that is the area that would be proposed for repaving. We, for better or for worse, have done this kind of as a patchwork, so that's that one. Building boiler, roof, and septic tank, 28,000 anticipated for those in the next 5 years. Unknowns, scale installation. This is one we talked a lot about 3 years ago, but had some questions about the cost benefit and haven't actually returned to it because, in part, we've taken on the town of Fayette, and our operations, the way they're structured now, really don't. I don't know. The scale probably wouldn't be the best fit.
So this can become known as not needed.
Yeah.
But didn't we put that money away under that?
We had at one point, but it.
It was in the capital account
Yeah, it
for the
was in the
transfer
capital account,
station.
yeah.
I think it's been used for other capital needs in the
Okay.
meantime,
Yeah.
because the scales haven't been seen as a priority.
Well, I think we even decided they weren't what we wanted, actually.
I think I recall that, yes.
Right.
That we-
It wasn't gonna
we
give
said
us
we
the
were not gonna-
saving.
We were not going to pursue it,
Yeah.
that we had adjusted rates and so forth.
Yeah, we had. And, so this one it's still there. I'm not sure we've had a formal decision to kick it out, but at some point we might want to.
I think you have, actually.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll take it off the list.
And we're getting a large influx of capital from Fayette and Wayne, because part of, when we went to the 3 towns, the reorganization involved them not only contributing to operations, but contributing to capital.
Yes.
So they are
absolutely.
63% and we're 47%. Combined, they are 53% and we're 47% of the costs. So we're saving for capital and they're saving for capital. So that's how we were able to say do the road this year, because we're getting these combined inputs each year. And both towns are very happy with their agreement with us.
Yeah, thank you. That's what's important to note, some of that revenue coming in and how. Right now, it's 6 to 8% of operating that's being put away to meet those needs. We also have a schedule of assets, again, for the transfer station that we've tried to balance out. The other item here is compactor roof system. This is something that I think does have a lot of value, as it would offer a permanent and long-term fix for the issue of deterioration of the equipment. Right now, our equipment's out in the open, and we also have issues with water and snow and ice getting into
What is
the
it,
loads.
just like a roof over?
It'd be like an awning, yeah. I mean, just a metal, large metal, like what you see at a bus port or something, similar to that. Ugly, but functional. So.
And large.
And large,
Very
yes.
large.
It would be quite it'd probably need to be 100 feet long by, I'd say, 20 to 40, depending.
But the purpose of that would be when we buy these new compactors that are expensive, the Gigantor roof would help continue to keep those, those
Nice and
assets well taken care of.
It would,
So-
absolutely.
I just, those sorts of things.
Would it also keep the trash a little drier, so we're not paying for water?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep.
That's a
Keep your
big thing.
trash a
Take a
little
mattress and get it wet.
Yep. No, it absolutely would. So that one, I think we're going to be waiting for our reserve account to get back up a little bit, but that's probably one of the bigger priorities for the transfer station outside of what's in the current 5-year horizon.
You could put solar on that roof.
We could.
That's right. Isn't it gonna allow?
They're probably gonna go back, but yeah. Anyway, thank,
Well, then we need the roof this year.
any other comments on transfer station capital?
I think it's good to keep the transfer station operating as smoothly and wonderfully as possible. It's the flow.
All right. So moving on to fire department, we do have proposed for this year, for the third time in probably 15 years, an expansion of the fire department building. And this is proposed for a building that is now over 40, getting, I think, to 40, it was 1978, so yeah, getting on 42 years old by the time we get this budget through. Repairs and expansion to add a new bay and training room, equipment space, and then dedicated space for current and future needs. And I think this is really important. When I first looked at the blueprints that the architect had done in 2012, I was a bit skeptical, but after talking to Lee and talking to others, we do have a need to plan ahead. And the building has served us well for 42 years. However, we're getting to the point where we were probably back in 1978, where what we had wasn't enough, and we needed to plan ahead. So emergency services, we're looking at having some a large area that can serve for training, as well as perhaps a shelter if need be. Having some more office space, which is very important for the department, and any additional services that might be coming in. And then we also have things like a washing facility for gear, so that the department volunteers don't have to carry around in their trunks. And also just having on-site services to make this a functional space for whatever needs might come up. So we're looking at about $500,000. This is a very round number right now, based on a 2012 estimate, hopefully some cost savings, and then inflation puts us right in this ballpark.
So,
Go
so we're
ahead.
going to get into this more specifically in a
We
few
will, and I'll
minutes,
just be
right?
asking Lee to talk,
Yeah.
more about his specific needs. I will say also again that we're working, starting to work with an engineer on this. This is one where we will have a lot of project involvement by engineer and architect firms, because this is certainly something that's beyond the capacity that we have in-house to do. So that's going to be a cost in this current fiscal year. However, we do have, to get that started, we do have reserves for the expansion project around $35,000, which should cover all of the engineering costs and hopefully have some left over. This is proposed to be bond financed. The impact is relatively small. We're looking at a 15-year bond. I believe I had it at 3.5%, maybe 4%. I think it's actually a very good time for us to be looking at this, because we did just retire a large road bond that was somewhere in the range of $150,000. So timing's good on this, and the need is here. We'll talk about that more later. Other items that are coming up, we have 2 fire engines, and after talking with Lee, Chief Mank, about this, it looks as though we probably won't be needing to replace both of them. One of them, engine 65, and Lee can correct me if I'm wrong, is going to be moved down into the slot that was engine 61. Backwards. Okay, we're moving engine 61 into the slot for engine 65.
Good number, you got it right, otherwise no.
Well, there's only 2 ways to go, right? But in any event, what we will be having then is repair work happening in the next couple of years to that engine that will be moving into the old slot. The new engine will cost approximately $400,000 to $450,000, depending. So in net, we're just where we were, except we'll have one older piece of equipment moved back and one brand new piece moved forward. So that schedule makes sense to me, and considering what we paid for the last fire truck, seems reasonable in the grand scheme of fire trucks.
And is that engine 65 is the one that will be, no, it's 61 that will be replaced?
Well, 65 is gonna
Go away.
because that's a 1988,
Right.
and it does its job, but it needs something better. So 61 is the mini pumper that we got in 2005, so that's basically gonna drop down into that utility truck roll and do the brush fires, the water supply, and the dry hydrants. And then the replacement will be another full-size fire truck.
Okay, so the 61 was due in 2024 and the 65 in 2022. So what year might you be expecting will be doing that?
It was, what did we figure, it was going to be 2023, I think, when we were talking about it.
Yeah, we were looking
It
at.
takes a year to
yeah.
get the truck, so it was, we got a year grace time after it's ordered, just like on the last one.
Yeah, and so that 2023 number is what I was looking at in large part because it's also concurrent with another step down the retirement of debt in the bond schedule. So it does fit nicely with that, and I can show you a graphic of that later.
And that, of course, will be bonded because we bond all of our fire trucks, because they're huge.
We don't have money in the bank, so
At
yeah.
450 grand.
Just stroke a check.
Yeah. And of course, the fire department does have a lot of miscellaneous equipment. I mean, they have infrared cameras that cost $4,000 to $5,000. So we expect that we will have some unknowns coming up in the future, and it's always good to keep some of that stuff in mind. Nothing they do is cheap, but they provide great service, so it's well worth it. I'll move on unless you have any other questions about. Yeah.
Please do.
Coming back to that.
We're coming back to it, yes, absolutely. Maintenance, we have nothing applicable other than capital equipment leases. Those are kind of a gray area. I think that the capital leases do belong in the capital department. However, they're not large, they're $10,000 to $15,000 each perhaps, and annually. And so that's where they are, where they belong, and they'll stay there.
Well, he was,
They do belong.
he was willing to bend on the other one,
Yeah,
so.
so anyway, I mean, I think I'm all for continuity, so we'll keep working on it. The 5-year horizon, we have the small pickup truck replacement. That one was actually scheduled for, originally for FY20, but the need arose sooner than we had hoped. We will not be getting another sticker on that vehicle, so it will be replaced this spring through state auction. We buy them from state surplus at a pretty good price, and they last 6 years. So the most expensive one on their spreadsheet that I looked at was $9,000. I don't believe we'll be getting one that costs that much. We'll probably be in the 5 to 7 range, and it'll go for 5 or 6 years, and we'll be good. But that's coming up again. The John Deere mower. This was at the end of the 5-year horizon. $15,000 for that. I fully expect that we'll be able to get more than the 5 years, considering how that thing's performing and how well it's treated. So. I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years we bump that out to further down the road. So, and then nothing else in the unknown category. We have a pretty good lock on our equipment. So here's the summary, just to talk about revenues and expenditures and where things are. And I want to show a couple slides that are not part of this, or a couple documents that are not part of this slideshow after, but we'll start here. $846,000 in total expenditures planned for the FY20 year. We're looking at offsetting revenues of around $500,000 in bonding, $100,000 in undesignated fund use. That would be again for the library project. $66,000 in use of designated funds, with $60,000 coming from roads and $6,000 coming from the station reserve. And then $180,000 in tax revenues. And that should tally up. A few notes. We are, this fiscal year budget, using less out of fund balances than we have in the last 10 years except for one. So what I'm trying to get at with that statement is that we've been slowly putting less money into those accounts and slowly using less. I think we're actually in a fairly healthy position. So if we needed to, we could bump out a little bit more out of undesignated or even out of the designated funds if appropriate. So that's one point. The other is that we do have, that's the end of that. We've talked a few times about the debt service schedule, so I just want to show a picture of that. Let's see. Let's see, I want to go to budget sheets 3.
So who's not on this thing?
Oh, that, because he has a ThinkPad? But I said, no desktop image? Oh, man.
No desktop image,
The kids, maybe?
The town office,
Right.
Robin, because she's retiring tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. It would be weird to see Robin's face on his lap.
Yeah. Or the fire station, the library,
All right,
a
I'm totally-
montage.
How about engine 65?
Engine 65.
So
yeah.
long.
Fading.
Farewell.
Donate 65 to you guys, that's what I'm with. I got 12,000.
Yeah.
All right, so here we are.
Going up to bid.
Wanted to point out that we do have these items scheduled out. Right now, I have a placeholder in for the 15-year bond for the fire department expansion. As you can see here, this blue, not this blue, the red item here is what expired this fiscal year, giving us a little bit more capacity in the next fiscal year. That was a road bond, and I think we had, let's see, $156,000 for that road bond. So one thing you'll notice is that what we were debt financing is actually not that far off from what we need to be saving every year. So that's another reason why I'm feeling fairly comfortable with just continuing on and kind of smoothing things as we go. But that's been retired. We will then see another step down in 2022. So either 2022 or 2023, likely 2023 is when we would be looking at that fire truck. And again, we have some extra capacity there, so that'll allow us to take care of that need. And depending on how things go, I don't see a lot else out there. I think that we're doing fairly well with projecting our long-term projects, and that our debt picture is just going to look, slowly better and better as we go, unless we have a major expense like, say, the repairs to the salt sand shed don't work, or something like that, and we have a $300,000 expense, but pretty unlikely. Potentially in the future, we could be looking at the capital needs for perhaps purchasing solar equipment. So that's something that could fit in here. But now that we're looking at the library and the fire station, those are two of the big questions that we had outstanding over the past couple of years. And I think we're starting to look at those. The other one, I guess, would still be that Giles Road Bridge. So that's one more that we might think about perhaps as being a bonding type question. But anyway, that's the debt horizon, so you can have a bit of an understanding of why we're pursuing some of this stuff and what we might be looking at in the future.
Eric, can I ask you a question about
Sure.
this? Just in terms of, because brushing up on my bar graphs, if that red is a road bond, the green, which is the largest chunk, is a road bond, there's no projected, there's no forecast or there's no anticipation of a future road bond or anything like that?
Well,
Okay.
there may be,
Because-
but, well, no,
But
it's
that's where I was talking, and
Yes,
that's
okay,
20
so that's the
20
bridge I was making. See, I
Yeah.
made the Giles Bridge to our
you did it.
conversation.
You
But
put
that might be
it together.
small.
So that's what I
because
wanted to,
We really entered on a total reconstruction project, which brought roads up to a level of management capacity that
Okay.
the kind of money we will put into them will still be significant, but it won't be the reconstruction kind of money. Although at some point, we probably will need to reconstruct some roads.
right, I guess it's just
Yeah.
because it's such a huge chunk. And that was
Right.
just for me, that just to help me understand. Since there wasn't, it's nice when, in 2021, when that goes away and.
Yeah. Well, so think about it this way, Dennis. That red bar, that red part of that first bar,
Mhm.
has actually, the way we're doing it this year, has been put into operating,
Yeah.
more or
Okay.
less. So you think about it that way. Once we have that money in place, in 2023, when that money goes away for that second road bond, it hopefully won't come back for a very long time until perhaps we need to do a reconstruction,
Right.
right?
So,
But that's probably unlikely if we maintain and do an inch every 12 years, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
so proactive thinking has resulted in some common sense cost saving.
Well, we made a big investment.
It was
Right.
a
That's what I'm saying.
10-year investment.
That's what I'm saying, you may, yeah, it's a
Right.
payoff on your investment, I love that.
And we did a lot when the asphalt was cheaper. When we actually paved more than we had originally planned.
Strike while the tar was hot.
Exactly. So I guess to summarize, in 2023, when that road bond is retired, we will have likely either money, $150,000 in 2019 dollars, either in operating, or perhaps it might come back if we have to do a 3-year bond. But the net impact on the tax rate is going to be real savings, I guess, is the way to look at it.
Just remember, in '23, we are getting a replacement fire truck, so there will be another little increase going across.
There'll be a different color.
It'll
66? I thought it was 68.
Yeah.
65?
65 and 61. Well, here's 70, 75, 70,
Replacing
75.
It will look a lot like that blue on the top of the first bar.
Good.
Continue.
No, you like that.
It'll
That's
look
all
a
right.
lot like that.
Is that our
Although
fire truck right now?
it is, but Ellen's pointed out in the past, 7 years is kind of a short term, and we might actually be able to cut that in half and knock it out to 15, right?
And, oh, sorry.
I have one question though, and I don't know that it was decided whether we wanted to buy the street lamp or not. And to me, that seems like a capital item.
That absolutely could be. Right now, we're,
I actually don't fully understand how you buy a street lamp.
yeah, well,
Is
you have
this
to buy
the-
out,
you've
you have to
clearly
buy
never
out
bought one.
CMP. You buy out CMP. You buy the poles or the right to use them, and then you buy the physical lamp.
And so
And
you have to keep them up.
you have to keep them up.
But you
So-
also get to put your own light bulbs in,
I know the
which would be
LEDs.
much less.
Right, but so it may just be something that's unique to think about.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and I guess the reason I haven't included it yet is because I don't think we're far enough along in the
Okay.
planning process to make that commitment. I
It
can try to.
didn't cost that much, as I recall.
I don't know exactly. I think we've got 40 streetlights in town. So, I mean, it could be tens of thousands of dollars. I don't think it would be hundreds. But I guess I just don't know enough right now to.
Okay.
But I might come back in a month and say, hey, here's a number, you know, and we'll put
Well,
it in.
the
But
towns that have been publicized doing that are looking at projected savings of between 30 and 50-ish% a year. So.
On operational
On
costs.
Yeah,
operations. So
yeah.
you're talking about having quite a big amount of money to put towards the purchase, just to defray the purchase. So in a short period of time, it's going to pay itself off.
yeah, I think I saw the 2 to 3 to 5 years is the worst case, and every town's different. But so what I can do, right now I have Anna Carl working on this in maintenance, and we'll put this up priority and see what we can find out in the next 2 weeks to a month. And if we can get enough information to confidently put something in the budget, I think we probably should, because if we want to do this, I think it's probably the right time. So I will make a priority out of that.
Because you need one more thing to do, Eric.
Well, this one, I'm gonna dump this on Anna, so, you know, it's,
It's delegation.
yeah, yeah.
That's right.
I'll be
With
staff
the,
on each.
The streetlights, KV-cog has or is about to receive a grant to hire someone to go out around and help municipalities with energy efficiency projects. And from what I've heard, the big thing is, LED lighting on the streets. The other question that I had, I wanted to go back to the Giles Road Bridge or non-bridge.
Yep.
I'm not sure that the residents themselves would be too keen about having a footbridge there, but there may be a safety need for a traffic bridge. Because if you figure, if you just picture that there was a serious fire that might have affected more than one home, and an ambulance was needed, and we were calling on Winthrop, to help with dealing with it, they'd have to go make an awful big circle to get there. And it might be, with just that one way in and one way out, you could see the fire and equipment and ambulances getting all tangled up with each other. So that, I would look at it as a safety issue, think
Yeah.
about.
I think that should always be looked at, but I would point out that we service a number of dead-end roads in town.
Yeah. Well, if I could, I'll ask Leah to come up to the microphone and perhaps speak to that, and then talk about our fire department expansion project. Oh,
How convenient. There you
Well,
go.
we'll just do Deb's project instead.
Straight out of the pavement's off.
That's right. You can use it.
It's not down there. That was one of our concerns when that bridge first went out of service. But it's been, how long has it been? It's been 10 years anyways, I think, since that's been open to traffic, or pretty close to it. And it's been a non-issue. Otherwise, in the confusion of somebody that doesn't know that, they can't get all the way through it, like the ambulance. There's all kinds of room for us down there. We operate in a lot worse conditions than that. I see your concern, but where Old Kents Hill Road's accessible from two ends, all within a mile, it's really minor.
so I talked a little bit about the structure of how we're planning on doing this and planning on moving forward with it. Lee's been a great help in helping me understand where the project came from, where it's headed, what some of the concerns were initially, the history, because this has been around a few times, but I just hope that you can explain maybe what the need is, as you did so well at our site visit on Tuesday or
I'm
Monday.
nervous now, I'm
Yeah.
talking on a microphone. And it was a lot easier there. I think everybody pretty much in this room knows where we stand as a fire department. As far as that station is will be 40 years. Dan Harriman did an awesome job back in '78. Looking into the future, he's kind of, he was real smart, because he definitely built it a lot bigger when it was built than it needed to be for the time. But he knew fire trucks were gonna get bigger. I don't know how he knew it, and he done good. So we grew into it, and probably for the past 15 years, we're right there. I mean, the trucks got to the size they are. We've shuffled around. We've got an open space. Like if you walk in there now, there's an open space, but that's occupied during the day by the ambulance. So we had to jockey some stuff around to make that happen, but it was definitely a benefit for the citizens in this area, Reedfield, Mount Vernon, Fayette, because it puts EMS right here. Since that station was built, when that was built, I think the intention was to go up. And then America with Disabilities Act came into it, so when they got ready to actually go up, you gotta have an elevator. Well, for the plan, the space that was there, an elevator was kinda out of the question, because there wasn't enough room, so we've just, we've made do, and it's worked out good, but every year there seems to be more training we have to do. Some of it's hands-on stuff, a lot of it is turning into classroom-type stuff, so we have a lot of that training. The fire station, if there's a big event, like in '98, we had the ice storm. I wasn't in Reedfield at the time, but my understanding was there was firefighters sleeping in cabs of trucks to get some rest, because they were out for a week constantly, helping get trees and stuff out of the roads. So that having a space where you can set up cots for something like that, if there's a big power outage, we'll have a large area where we can accommodate people to come. I know we use Guile Hall right now. We can get so many people in here. It's got a generator. It's a given. So between this and the fire station with that extra room, we could accommodate a lot of residents, forewarning, if need be.
So Lee, one of the things that we talked about the other night on the site visit was in terms of protection. We have a volunteer fire department that, in comparison with what some other communities are facing, you would qualify as fully staffed.
We have a real good, strong fire department. As I'm sure you've all seen on the news, there's a struggle with all fire departments. And it's, volunteerism is down. I think everybody sees that, no matter whether you're the fire department, the planning board, because I think everybody's seeing it. There's just, everybody's busy, everybody has families, so it takes away from a lot of stuff. Everybody works out of town. So we're fortunate, but the trend, and you look at all sides of it, the trend seems to be volunteerism's going down, especially in the fire departments, because it's a big commitment. It's lots of training, so you never know. But looking at other municipalities, when you start getting down to, you got 4 or 5 people that constantly are around for fires. You can't put a house fire out with 4 or 5 people, generally. Because by the way we operate, if the place was staffed, an engine company of 4 might get there and it's a room content fire, and they put it out. But it takes us, by the time we get there, by the time we get to a lot of room and content fires, it's much more than a room and content fire, by then it's a full-blown fire. So it's just, it might come to the point down the road, 12 years, where this area needs to look at having a staff fire department. A lot of towns, Belgrade's added and has a staff rescue department during the day, and their fire also, so their responses, and it's just, when you look down south of us, that's what's happened. So it's just kind of being ahead of that curve, so if that does happen, and 15 years down the road, there's no volunteers, we gotta hire firefighters, they need a place to sleep. The medical, it's probably gonna look the same way. Originally when this design was, it was always looked at, it was gonna be the need for an ambulance being here 24/7. And I talked to the chief of the ambulance over there, and he's like, yeah, it's gonna be neck and neck between fire and EMS, but our population's getting older. There's a lot of it, is what he sees kinda the key. There's a lot of older people in the area, and that requires a different level of service. So, and it might get to the point where it's more feasible to have an ambulance here 24/7. So that design that we've got now has provisions to have 2 sleeping quarters in it.
So this 40-year run, really, the next build-out is intended to be a multi-decade run as well.
Yeah, it's designed that Reed Field Fire can grow much like they did into the building that we have. And hopefully we get to a plateau where the fire departments don't have to keep getting bigger. He likes pictures.
I'd just like to expand on what Bruce started and put a big congratulations out to our fire department. Lee, you told us we have 30-plus members, and several of our mutual aid
Towns, I mean,
Towns have-
some of them are struggling right now. It goes up and down.
they've got 5, 6, 7 people. So you're doing something right. Our volunteers are doing something right together.
We've got the right people in town that wanna do what they do.
So, congratulations.
Thank you. We've worked hard over the past 10 years since I've been chief to get our guys where they are.
Well, and you've got a good junior firefighter feeder program. You've got a lot of young guys involved, and that's great.
Yeah, and my point really is building exactly off what you're saying, is this is also an investment in people. It's not just concrete. I mean, it's providing the training underpinnings so they feel comfortable with what they're doing. we were just talking about the other night, just the whole concept of being able to clean gear off at the station rather than,
Taking
you
it
know,
home and washing it.
trying to drive home with this stuff and.
My wife
getting
loves it when I wash my.
I'll bet she
hair.
does. So part of this is, what do they call that, an evacuator or
Extractor.
extractor?
It's
Excuse
a
me.
glorified word for washing machine.
It's a big washing machine.
Big commercial washing
But
machine.
speaking of extractors, I think that is in the plan, is to put in a vehicle emissions system to pull the exhaust out, which will protect the lives of the firefighters by not filling the bays up with exhaust.
This particular plan does not have an evacuator. They call that an evacuator.
Not an extractor.
But I think I saw in Eric's writing somewhere that that's in his request along with a sprinkler system. Not that we're doing it
No,
definitely, but to get it
and I
priced
know
in.
at one point, we priced out an evacuator system, and I think it was just a standalone, just to put in what it was, and I do believe at the time, and this was probably 12 years ago, 10 years ago, we tried to get it on a AFG grant, is what we tried to get it on. So we actually wrote a grant at one point to get it.
Well, it's very needed equipment.
Yeah, it's on the wish list for the facility, definitely.
The sprinkler system, I think, was taken off from what you have now, just because all of a sudden cost became an issue back in 2012, whenever we did it. By law, we're not mandated to have a sprinkler system.
Because you got all
Even-
the other.
Even going on worst case scenario, saying that we're sleeping, we had egresses and the alarm system says we don't have to. But I'm also, I don't want to be telling people if you build a house, you should put a residential sprinkler system in. If the town, when they make an addition, doesn't even want to put a residential sprinkler system in the $500,000 fire station addition, it's just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
If you're gonna practice what you preach, I think it's the old
So you're gonna have
saying.
smoke alarms in here too, huh?
Talking about,
Sprinkler systems say, I mean, yeah, they cost you more money, but it beats your house burning down, and
Right.
there's a few,
Turns out every time.
there's a few residences in Reedfield that have a residential sprinkler system in it, and one's made a big difference. It changed it from us going in and cleaning up some water and blowing out some smoke to being there 6 hours, putting out a fully blown structure fire. Because where it was gonna be it would be a lot tougher than the Giles Road over there to get there. So, they do work, and it is a cost, but it's a cost that's,
You're right.
could save a lot of money.
So I think it behooves us all to make sure that the proposal is really sound and tight. I mean, you can make the emotional case for doing this, but if you go in with $500,000 and it ends up being $600,000 and you can't do the project, I mean, in the past, it's been an issue, the fire station redoing, rehabilitation's been an issue. And so you want to go in with as tight a proposal as you can, and these are old engineering things. I know you're doing new stuff
Yeah, and
now.
it all has to be updated, and that was the price back then.
And so it's probably not the price.
It's probably gonna be more. You add a sprinkler system, it's gonna be more. You add a evacuator for the diesel out there,
Well,
it's
and
gonna be
if the
more.
septic system is a non-starter, which I understand is a potential issue.
It's a real potential, yeah. I mean,
That's a big problem. And if you're gearing up to bring this as a warrant question and then you pull it back at the last minute, I think it makes it harder to get it passed. So I'm just thinking of how you present it in the best light with the best chance of getting it, in front of the voters so they understand it, they're not surprised, and you can come out with a positive result.
Yes.
But I worry about the timing on it. It's already March, it's almost March.
It's March, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we're there.
And what's the timeline for getting this all done so that you can start doing the public education stuff that needs to be done
Mhm.
leading up to a vote?
Yeah, so we would need to be working very, very diligently in the next couple months to have information ready for the public budget meetings at the end of March and then mid-April.
Is that feasible, Eric?
Well, I think having an engineering estimate is feasible, having a completed design is feasible. But I share your concern that it might be tight.
And I'll bring something up, because I know you took this and picked it up and run, and thank you for doing it. All the select board and the budget committee, because I know he's talked to you. But all I had the last time we brought this up was the architectural estimate, and that was tough.
Yep.
Because it wasn't,
You need something more concrete.
something more concrete, because that's what I kept running into, and it was, where do you draw the line? Do you come up with a nice round, you know, and I think architects, when they give you an estimate, I think they do it on the high side, or that's what Bob had told me when he did it. He didn't like sugarcoat it, you know, he's realistically, and it's hard, because they're conceptual, that's conceptual, because it's, I stand back and I'm to the point, how much taxpayer money do I spend on something that may fly and won't fly? So that's about as far as we went, architectural, conceptual drawings and estimates. And that was, what you're saying is 100% correct. That was a tough, that
Right,
we
and
really,
you put a $500,000 bond or a $600,000 bond in front of people, and then you're like, whoa, that's a lot of money. So you know, having those estimates as hard as possible and say, you know,
Yeah.
here they
That
are, they're
was-
nice
remember
and
how
tight,
much
and this is why
they
we
always
have
come back to
have it.
that she said that. And that was always, that was always, because Teresa was really involved in that, and that was always come back.
That's been my understanding in conversations with Eric and what we've talked about on the board thus far, is that Eric's going to work with Mainland and get together pretty much just what you're asking for. So that all of that information is not down to the nuts and bolts and 2x4s, but much better than just a square footage estimate. And have a presentation that demonstrates the need, what will be done. And then I had suggested the other night, and I'll do it now, and Bill, you're listening back there, I'm sure, but I think it would be good to have a film made for both projects, the library and the fire station, lead the presentation you've given tonight and the other night, having a film of you showing the public what you've told us about. These are the spaces, these are the issues we have, this is where the new things would go, this is what they'll do to benefit us. People are much more interested in looking at visual things than reading something. And I think that's a good way to promote it. We didn't have that option years ago.
I think too, it helps that when you look at it in context of the entire budget, setting the school aside.
Right.
That right now we're on track to be pretty, you know,
Stable.
And so it's not boosting people's taxes.
Right.
Their property
Yeah.
taxes.
Well, and
to
showing
make
the
an
graph.
investment like this.
Right, showing the graph. We've retired this amount of debt.
People don't understand that.
No, some people do.
Well, a lot of.
Yeah.
I think we put out as much as we
$500,000.
can without being overkill, but so that you appeal to the different ways that people perceive knowledge.
And then at least you put as much information in front of people in a way they can understand it, whether it's a video, so people
Yeah.
who learn that way, or who appreciate hearing from the fire chief.
On the
do
Facebook
that.
page, Dennis took lots of
Mhm.
pictures.
But you have to,
Yeah.
you can't then come back the next year and say, geez, we were $250,000 off.
Yeah, no.
Because
Like Farmingdale had to do.
You'll never get the extra 250.
Well, I think.
But the
I
new
think-
fire station came in underneath the 1.7.
Yes, I saw that today. That's good.
I completely understand what you're saying, and I share some of those concerns about, things are tight. The way it stands now, we would be working with the engineer to get things together, getting a proposal, getting that cost estimate and engineering estimate.
Is the engineer doing the septic question too?
They would be as well, yes, and it would be part of probably shared costs between the library and the fire station, and of course the other two property owners who tie into it.
Yeah, so if that septic system is undersized, is that
It-
fixable?
It isn't undersized because we did a big study when we did the addition. It just, the septic system that was there was supposed to, capital improvement was always in the plan for 2018, that there was issues that need to be addressed.
It
So
wasn't a
that-
size issue, it was an operation.
It was an
issue.
operation, but the septic system that's there, for what we wanted to do,
To add a
added to it,
laundry
it was
and-
gonna be fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
so
heard something different.
one of the things we've been working on is pulling together all the past work that's been done, and so there was that study. I think that it's still relevant because it is based on volumes. And at the time, the gentleman who has since retired, I've been trying to scrounge people up to find out what's been going on with this, but I did talk with him briefly. He did seem to think that it was still relevant, still appropriate, and still acceptable. At the time, the Cornerstone Cafe was actually a cafe, and their assertion was that the cafe would be using more than if it was a residential use. I'm not sure if that's still the case, because now it's a residence with, I think, 2 or 3 apartments in it. So, we're gonna have to look at that again as well. But the horizon was gonna be, or is going to be, unless we'll see what happens. But looking at getting the engineering estimate, using that and going to the bond bank to get the bond, going out to bid over the winter, and then having construction happen starting spring of 2020. So that was the horizon, if I had to just lay it out. It all depends on the confidence that we have in that original engineering estimate, because I completely agree, we don't want to proceed with this. And if in a couple weeks, we're not comfortable, I think I would be saying, let's stop, let's put, money aside for engineering, just plan on that, although we actually already have it in the reserves from the prior effort, so.
Finish the study.
Finish the work, right, yeah, so, and that may be a better option overall, and then stretch things out. But
Well, it won't get cheaper.
it will not get cheaper, but, yeah.
And if you're, trying to keep in mind the goal that you set, which was to keep mill rates
Level.
outside the school.
Outside the school.
Well, only what we can handle. We
Yeah.
can't influence anything else, just.
But, so it would seem to be an opportune time, but if you don't feel
Yeah.
like, and you don't want to overborrow either, right? So,
No.
but if it's, I would think that if you were $200,000 off, it's gonna be, you will never get
Devastating,
another
end of project,
$200,000
yeah.
the next
No,
time
and
around.
that's why when
Right.
we're working off, we still gotta get current staff. This is kinda, I think you're looking for the blessing to continue with it and see what we can do.
Yeah, effectively, and it's gonna be interesting.
And, I mean, it's not emotional, it's black and white. We need more space. The guys give the town a lot. They need to be able to come back, and they need to be able to clean their gear. They need to be able to take a shower if they need to be.
I totally get that, but I think you need to talk about the emotional side
I
of
mean, it's just.
having a
we-
great fire department.
Yeah.
Right.
We've been in there, and we make do with what we've got.
It's a certain, it improves the quality of life.
I
Well, it
think
certainly
we have to make sure the residents understand that that building is that old. They're growing out of it, and this isn't frivolous, this is something they need.
Yeah,
I think the case is there, but I mean, I think this question is very, very important,
I
that
agree.
we really have specifics. So,
And I'm a firm believer in that we need to get the estimates on everything, and then if there are parts of it that are cost prohibitive and you feel you can live without them, then they can be taken out before we present it as a project to the town. But we need to get the cost on the extractor and on the sprinkler system and
And evacuate.
Evacuate. And the 6-burner stove we're gonna have in the galley kitchen, all that stuff, yeah, because those aren't cheap either, so.
I mean, so that.
But I mean, it should be done right. If you're gonna use it as a shelter for emergency situations, you can't have a 4-burner stove from a commercial big box
We,
store.
we, we
That's
won't
not
bill it
gonna
as a
work.
shelter because there's like shelter guidance books like that thick and your $500,000 fire station edition probably jack up to $1 million, so.
Okay, so we don't wanna do that, so we'll just
It's
go with the
just-
4-burner stove.
It'd be a warming center.
A warming center.
So you gotta get on the right terminal, warming center.
Okay. See, this
I
is
don't
why
even
we
thi-
need
I di- I
you.
really don't think there's a manual on a warming center.
Yeah.
You just, you go with that, it's a time of emergency, so that kind of changes everything, but we
Well, and
we need a place to put residents if we have to.
Cost comparing to what other towns have recently been spending on fire stations, this is a smaller addition. It's not a replacement, we're not starting from scratch. It's a much smaller budget. It's reasonable,
Right.
and so we need to present
Just bear in mind, in
it
a few years, you're gonna buy engine 66.
for the same
So-
amount of money as the whole
Well,
building.
yeah, I mean, it's.
Instead of buying 2 fire trucks, we're only buying 1.
That's right.
So there's,
Well, you could
We-
bring out that argument when,
that-
at that time, but it's just
Even though-
hitting
even
the
though the
town
money
with $1
dollars will be
million
the same,
in
but-
spending.
and unfortunately, it costs money.
No,
protection.
I know, it's just
That's-
sort of
Kind of said that to
politics.
the hoity-toities yesterday.
I mean, we have a very good case, I think, to take to voters on this. But you're right about having everything, all our ducks in a row and so forth. So what I would ask Eric to do, and maybe in conjunction with Lee or whoever else we're working with, even the engineer or whatever, is the select board is now meeting on an every 2-week basis, is we would have an update. We're here, so if we have to defray, or if we have to say, we're gonna do this with a special town meeting, which probably would rather not do, but we'll have some choice paths to follow. So if we can just have a regular update on that, that would be, here's where we are, we know this much about the project, or we have all the plans, or we just do not think we will have this in time for the public hearing, and therefore we're recommending X, Y, Z. And you and I will probably talk about that on the phone in the interim week as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and
Yeah.
I think that we definitely will be proceeding with due caution on this, and some real serious questions and considerations on.
My goal is to
early
see
on.
it done, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no,
That's,
I
mean,
think it is the right time.
The energy
but
of
it's-
the select board anyhow, I know, is to
Yeah.
try to get this done.
Yeah, the challenge has been coming to the realization that we have this opportunity later in the process or later in the year when we, ideally we would have started this, August, September, October last year. But here we are, so we'll see what we can
At
do.
least most of the stuff was done. And it's not your fault, everybody's retired.
It's not.
It'd be a lot easier if the architect hadn't retired and the engineer
Oh, yeah.
there hadn't
It would have
retired.
been.
Well, and I guess I just want to add, because I think this goes to what Ellen was saying, we need to also look at what the fire auxiliary does for the town. You do special fundraisers on an annual basis where you raise money through donations and you buy equipment, specialized equipment, that you're not coming to the general taxpayers for. This is another big benefit to the town. It increases your capabilities and your efficiencies.
The citizens of Reedfield are awesome. We have a lot of support, and the fire department definitely appreciates it. It shows.
Yep.
Thank you, Lee.
All right.
I think we want to try to move on. We're at 8:30. Is everybody comfortable with working on the library piece and concluding this?
Well, since Deb has sat here for
Yeah,
2
and
hours,
I-
yes.
I should apologize to Deb that if we could have given you entry times into the meetings, that probably would have been better for both of you. I'm sorry about that. So, Eric,
Yeah, so the library, We did start with about, again, another round number. This one I think is a little bit more easily worked with, and the engineer estimates will be more easily arrived at. One of the things we've been discussing is how to proceed with this. I think that what we'll likely be doing is putting this out to bid as a design-build project where we will ask contractors to come in with their best suggestion for how to fix the problem we have, which is the roof. And I think we'll look for alternates, one for perhaps a complete replacement and one for a repair, and let them come up with their best ideas and costs. Again, we will be working with the engineer to get some estimates up front. The other items, we have some fair estimates on. The heat pumps, for example, that is priced out, those with a contractor. The egress and those other items we can come up with pretty quickly and pretty easily. So as far as the time horizon goes, I'm much more comfortable with our ability to meet that and come up with a better, more reliable number for this. Also, because we're not borrowing and we're using a designated, that there's a little bit of a difference, I think, in that. But yeah.
So do you really think this cost $100,000? To me, it doesn't seem like it does.
I think
And
the
there's
full
like
roof
this
replacement-
psychological thing with $100,000.
Yeah, no.
It's not a re-roof thing.
Well, it could be a whole new roof.
Could
I mean,
be.
one possible outcome, because the structure is so old, the roof, it has no internal components. If you're going to be cutting little holes and trying to feed, joists and things through a hole in the ceiling, and then you're going to have to replace the shingles anyway, there's a real question as to whether or not we're not better off just replacing the entire roof, which is, more or less where I think it ought to land. Because I'm not super keen on putting $30,000 and leaving old timbers in place. But that's one option. So I think that the roof itself could probably be $40,000, $50,000. And then adding on the heat pumps at 10 to 15, the egress another 10 to 15. I think it doesn't take long, especially with interior work, $5,000 to $10,000 per floor, structural work. I think that number is probably close, but
This one doesn't concern me quite as much because you're not borrowing for it.
yeah, I agree.
And
Yeah,
if you don't need it, you don't.
don't use
You
it.
don't use
Yeah.
it. You don't use it.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
Well, I've been making a case, and I think it goes along with the fire department. We're not asking the fire department to come up with the funds for their building, and I don't think we need to ask the library board to come up with the funds for their building. So now that we've made the decision that we're going to keep the library, and we're going to go and do this roof project, I think it's important to finish the library and not leave parts of it in its 1900 stage, which is where some of the rooms are, with the plaster and lath falling off the wall and ceiling, and the floors that have been covered with various materials that have aged out 30 and 50 years old. I think they just need to be pulled up and appropriate material put down. We're not making a Taj Mahal. It doesn't have to be brought up to, living standards where we would raise small children, but on a full-time basis. But we need to have a building that's sound, that we're not going to come back in another 5, even 10 years and say, well, we need another 100,000. I think we should approach this reasonably and responsibly and get the work done and have a functioning, working library, and just settle this 2-decade-old issue of what are we doing with the library?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that, and I think that this is similar to the fire department in that we have a strong case for doing this. There's a real need. But I completely understand Ellen's point that the numbers are soft, and we can't have that going into, from a budget perspective, it's about as soft as it can get, but without having anything, behind it. There is something behind it, but we need to strengthen it. We need to get an itemized list of by room, by project element, and that's where we're headed. We're just not there yet. And this is one I think that, again, we'll have much more success much more quickly than with the fire department. But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. We need to have better numbers.
Do we want to have Deb?
Please, yes. We extended that courtesy to Lee, so we want to do that. I would also point out, too, that just like we were talking about the volunteers and so forth in the fire department, we have that similar situation, a very robust and active library community. A roof protects protects the collection as well. And, you know, all the elements that we're doing internally there to upgrade that building. So that's a big piece of
And
this.
I believe you have a huge percentage of your summer population that utilizes the library
Oh,
as
yeah.
well. It's one of the things the summer residents always tell us about is they love the library.
We even have people that live in Brunswick and come all the way to Reedfield to borrow their books because they can't get the books they want in Brunswick fast enough. So I thought that was interesting. What's that?
Is that Wendy?
No, no. This is a person who has he has a camp on the lake here, so he can borrow from our library. He doesn't need a card, he's got one. But I met him last summer and I said, really? You've got a big library in Brunswick and you come here. Oh, thank you. Anyway, a lot of people love the library. They're very supportive of it. I'm surprised you want me here again tonight. I've spoken to this group quite a few times in the last couple months, but thank you for giving me
We have you
another
on camera
opportunity.
tonight, that's the difference.
Well, thank you, Bruce. It just makes me feel so comfortable. Well, I thank you all for coming, for most of you for coming the other night for the tour. So I think that probably helps you get a better idea of where we're going, how we're proceeding, with or without help, where we went forward. We're cleaning, we're getting rid of things that we don't need, we're reorganizing, we're looking at how we can make the library more function better in terms of space and where things are, and I think we've made some big improvements already. Of course, it helps to have the $25,000 from the Stephen King Foundation, so we're going ahead and we're really redoing the circulation room. We need a desk for our librarian. She works wherever she can find a little space. She has no real space there. It's going to be reconfigured when we're done, and I think it's going to work quite well. We've given it a lot of thought. We are doing more and more programs. We just started a knitting club just recently. Well, a patron came in and said, can we do a knitting club? That's already grown to like 8 or 10 people were there last Saturday, which is terrific. And that's so quick. I want to invite you all to come to St. Patrick's Day potluck. That will be happening up at the Kents Hill Ski Lodge on Route 41. That will be March 17th on St. Patty's Day at 4:30. Bring dish to share, and there's going to be Celtic musicians there to, and if you are a Celtic musician, please come and join in the jam. Eric, right, you're a Celtic musician, aren't you?
I have a banjolele, which is actually in
There you
that
go.
genre, but I don't play it much, so I'll have to practice up.
Practice up, you got a couple weeks.
All right.
8:40 and we heard banjolele. Wherever that,
So that's where we are.
that's where we are in the meeting. Hey, hey.
So I don't know if anybody has any questions about what we're doing, what we're trying to do, or how we'd like your support to do it.
So the grant was mostly for a lot of the interior program oriented support. And the grant request was for 50, and we got a $25,000 grant.
Correct.
So coming around to the building itself, we feel that that's the town's responsibility, and Catherine's been a great spokesperson in regards to that, to make sure that structurally we are taking care of things. Internal design, maybe a little bit more in your bailiwick with that grant, is that correct?
I would say so, but some of the grant was originally to put heat pumps in. But of course, like you said, we didn't get all the money that we had asked for, so something was going to have to give, and we were trying to prioritize. And the circulation area is a big priority because it just is this sort of central hub of getting people in and out and providing good service and allowing our librarian to do her job well, which it's difficult for her to do her job well when you don't have a place to really call your own. So we're going to improve that first, and then we haven't made the discussion about where the rest of the money will go, because it won't require all that money to do that. We haven't had that discussion as a board yet. It's kind of one step at a time.
But you had the list from the grant that allows you to prioritize what's coming out of that.
Yes. Yeah.
Eric, is there any, I don't know the right way to phrase this, how definite will this be? Is this going to be a separate article, or is this just going to be part of operating expense?
Well, that's a question. I mean, it would be for the major capital work. It could either be in with other capital items as we commonly do, or it could be a separate item. I could go either way on it. I think leaning would probably be to have it as a separate warrant article because it is a larger item and one that we haven't done in the past. Not like traditional or annual savings, for example, for different things. So yeah, I think that's a question for the select board, really. But
So my question
Yeah.
on that would be, if we reroute Giles Hall, would we put that into a separate warrant article? If we
Yeah.
redid the transfer station building, would we put that in? It's,
I think it would be part of the transfer station. I think it would be part of Guile Hall, which is administrative, so.
But this is
But
a
that's up to-
capital project.
it is a capital
we do have a
project, yes.
separate warrant article for capital items. So it,
Right.
we
So
would
it
have
could
a
be,
capital
it could be in a
items.
capital warrant with a breakout.
Well, it always does.
It
have a
always does have a
breakout.
breakout,
Yeah,
yes.
But it's either under that capital article or a separate article.
So I guess I'd like the budget committee to weigh in on that as you finish your deliberations and what you see as making the most sense of how to categorize things, because we try to take your expertise and then kind of rubber stamp it, rather than us trying to figure it out, because that's what you guys do. Does that make sense?
Yep.
We will work on that. I have one question. I was looking through the report. I noticed that there are some safety items that were noted back here, and I think we're working on those, but I just wanted to make sure, particularly around the entrance. that-
Yeah, we absolutely are, and we've addressed the issue with the interior safety items that we can address. The ramp and pressure-treated wood steps. As soon as we get the thaw and we're able to work outside, Jesus, I don't know. But as soon as we're able to work outside, that is one of the top priorities for our maintenance staff, is to replace fully that stair and ramp system.
Okay.
So absolutely.
So that isn't part of this project, that's just.
No,
something that
that's
needs
just
to be
a
done.
maintenance need. That's going to be probably 2 or
Thank
3
you.
days of time and a whole lot of pressure-treated lumber. Yeah.
But the other safety concern, which is if we utilize the upstairs to have an exterior.
That egress is, yes,
That's
that
part of the
is.
big project.
Yep, and that would probably be one of the, either a prefab type cast iron or perhaps another pressure-treated structure, yeah, like you see on apartment buildings.
It's not a bounce house, huh?
Not a bounce house.
And along
To
those,
Dennis's disappointment.
along those lines, Andy, Eric, you have various projects going on between maintenance and the fire department about the safety issues that were brought up in that report also. They're taking place currently in this budget year.
Yeah,
Correct.
absolutely. And we're looking at those operationally and as a safety item, definitely. We have steps there that need to be replaced. And we're working on sensors for the doors and then some other cosmetics and functional improvements that need to happen. Much as the library is working to put their best foot forward by working on the interior, making those changes, keeping the place going, we're doing something similar with the fire station to make sure that we're doing the best with what we have, no matter what. About right, Lee?
Sounds good to me.
Amen.
Are there any other questions for Deb or comments on the library?
Congratulations on your grant one more time,
Yes, thank you.
and on all the work that we saw you folks have been doing, moving mountains of books and videos and audiobooks and furniture.
We were
It's
pleased
amazing.
with the result. I hope everybody's pleased with it, because we like it. I think it's good.
Absolutely.
It's always a busy place.
Very impressive that you have a huge volunteer group, and the fire department has a huge volunteer group. And it's very impressive that those two entities really are
And we
supported
have
by
a
the town.
terrific librarian, by the way.
Yeah,
She's great.
she
If
is.
you haven't met her, if you don't have a card, Shame on you.
Or a current card, Catherine.
Come and get one.
You know, you don't have to go to the library to borrow a book. If you have your library card, you can do it online.
You can. There's a cloud library, digital, a digital library. But it's nice to come to the library. It's nice. It's a great place to sort of meet your neighbor or see your neighbor if you haven't for a while. So please come, get a card if you haven't got one. They're free.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you,
Thank
Deb.
you. Sorry you had to wait.
So do you have more presentation, Eric?
No, that was all I had. I think that if we were going to go back to the agenda, it would just be any public comments
Right.
that were, yeah.
So, yeah, so we're open for public comment at this
Well, now that
point.
you've been here all night,
That's all I can say is,
New chairs for Guile Hall, right?
oh no, these are perfect. But we could get
More
cushions.
comfortable seats.
We should have brought the
But you're,
benches out.
yeah, you guys are in the high rent district. Ralphino, Mountain View Lane, I've seen you before. Start out, just, people probably don't tell you enough, but thank you for your work. It's a busy time of the year, and you probably don't get much appreciation or thanks for what you do. But you run a tight ship, you run good meetings, and at least from this quarter, it's appreciated. I wanted to be here to speak to a couple of the things on the capital agenda, namely the library and the fire company. They are two probably of the most important components in any successful small town community. They pull things together, and it's very evident that that works here in Reedfield. And for what it's worth, I'm certainly in support of both. I have a little bit of concern about the price tag for the fire company project, namely because I'm not sure it's sufficient and that an addition does exactly what it is you need to do. We hear from the chief that that building is 40 years old and it's served you all very well over that time. Is $500,000 going to give you another 40 years, which I think would be the objective? So my advice would be both for the library and the fire company. Don't nickel and dime it. Do it one time, do it right, and I think the community will be behind you for both because they're both well thought of. Libraries heavily subscribed, and as I found out tonight, you got a raft of volunteers for emergency services providers, which is very, very unusual. And to that point, speak briefly, a lot of communities have incentive programs for their volunteers based on physicals, number of calls, training. It's something that you guys might want to consider because it allows you to keep the people that you have that are qualified, and it helps you attract new members. And you wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel to do it. There are a lot of them out there. I know a little bit about it. I could help if that's a road you wanted to go down. Although I hear that the state is trying to put something together, but that's like trying to decipher the Rosetta Stone and you'll be waiting forever for something. Yeah. I think you'd probably be better off going on your own and maybe you could show them how to do it. And the other thing that is a little bit distressing when you're talking about the four corners at the center. Have any of you tried reaching out to our legislators? I don't know how high up they are in the food chain in the legislative pecking order in Augusta, but God, we ought to be able to put some pressure from the legislative side on the Department of Transportation to get their help. This is a big deal for them. It's a busy, busy road, and they ought to have a piece of this action. It shouldn't be exclusive to us. And somebody's got to know these folks. I know one state rep, I think, is in Winthrop.
Oh, we know them both.
We know them both.
We do.
Yeah,
Well,
we
take
know
them
them
out to
both, yeah.
lunch, make them buy, and get them to help you. And again, thank you all so very much, and good luck with the rest of the budget season.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks for
Mayor.
coming.
You can
Thank
come
you.
anytime.
I'll try to be nice. I guess that, you know, now I get a thank you.
Maybe we'll buy you some seat cushions.
Are there any other,
Running way over for the normal length of your
Yeah.
meetings.
are there any other closing comments or questions?
Maybe just from the select board to the budget committee, thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In many other towns, I've heard that they work together. All meetings happen jointly, and I'm really thankful that we don't do that. Because I know you guys meet a lot, and we already meet a lot. I think this is meeting 5 for February for us, so I really appreciate what you do. You're a great group of people. You put together a great product last year. We expect the same again this year, and it was well received by the public, so expect the same thing again, from the public, I mean. Good reception.
Here, here.
Thank you. Okay, I don't need a motion to adjourn. I think we can just adjourn.
Just do it. Bam.